it's not like there's this promise land. It's about setting up foundation and a structure for continual improvement. Yeah, it's hard hearing that.
Sorry, dude. I didn't think I'd make you emotional with that statement.
Yeah, shit. Hold on.
Damn, dude.
Way to go, Max.
Yeah, sorry, man. Oh, shit.
Why'd you do that?
I'm the worst interviewer ever.
No, it's good.
Had to have one more question.
I'm like, this podcast is almost over.
Take me to lunch, please.
We got Brent Fikowski here. What, Brent, do you want to say to about 3,000 to 4,000 people that you didn't already just say to Mayhem's 30K to 20K?
It's not a competition. If it was, you're losing.
Yes, I think so. If you count is the determining factor, we're definitely going to lose that battle.
Well, we're going to talk about a lot of things. And so some of those, there will be a crossover, certainly, but hopefully.
Have you watched it yet?
No.
It just came out hours before we're filming this one.
Yeah.
I did took a bunch of notes from that because I was listening, and then I have follow-up questions because I'm like, well, if I was in that room, I'd want to know this or that. But prior to getting into that, I feel like you've kind of been like radio silent a little bit over the course of the last 9 months-ish, but we know you've been working. So I feel like just kind of tell us what you've been up to in retirement, where the PFAA stands.
Yeah, thanks.
I haven't heard much about the demands. So
I mean, last 9 months have definitely been busy. You know, it's funny, we use the word retirement, and when I announced I'm no longer competing, I didn't really want to use that word in a way, but that's just the word that you use that people understand what's going on. So I just said, I'm retiring from competition. And so people ask me, how's retirement going? I said, I don't have this like pile of cash. I'm like swimming in that. I'm like just cozy. That's certainly not the case. Maybe when I'm 60 or something. Yeah. But no, still working. And really last little while, it's been a lot of travel. So, most recently here and, did the podcast at Cookeville. And then before that, I was on the road for 42 days in a trailer with my wife and my daughter. We had this amazing trip, which was awesome.
42 days in a row?
Yeah, 42 days in a trailer in our car driving.
What were you doing? Seeing the whole country?
Just seeing the whole country, yeah. Spending time with athletes, spending time with some managers, dropped into a bunch of gyms. Got to go and see the first World Fitness Project event.
Yeah, so I saw you out there.
Yeah. And so I mean, we drove I live in Kelowna, BC, drove south to Spokane, Idaho, Denver, and then drove all the way east to Kansas City, then Indianapolis, north Chicago, north Winnipeg, Canada, and then all the way west back home through the mountains. So,
dude, that sounds awesome.
Yeah, about 10,000 kilometers, and which is, I think, 7,000 miles, something like that.
Did you get anything done for your work-related stuff? Or
it's harder. But a lot of good conversations and like even just time on the road, like thinking and I think it helped inform, what I'm going to be doing in some personal ways and the PFA as well. Just, what it's like at competitions, it's hard. You're there for 3 days and, you get a couple, hey, how are you doing? But there's not a lot of like time for deep conversation. Yeah. And so having that with, James Sprague and with Katrin and with Justin Medeiros and even like Jacob Hepner, who's retired, but kind of getting into the weeds more was really good. And then before that, I'd flown in and out of, Proven and Mayhem, and I was there. That was a couple months ago now. And before that, flew in and out of New York and met some athlete associations there in different sports, which was really cool. I've met them online before, but good opportunity again.
What did you get from that? That semes interesting, like being able to pick another sport's brain.
Yeah,
Can you say who they were?
It's called, let me get it right. Yeah, it's just athletes.org, and they're working to create an athlete association for the NCAA.
Ooh, for the NIL stuff?
Yeah, so it's really interesting climate there. I mean, I hopefully I don't get any of this wrong, but essentially for the longest time as an NCAA athlete, you weren't allowed to get any money. Like if your coach bought you dinner, you were in trouble. You might get banned for a year from competing. Your coach would get, some sort of sanctions.
Reggie Bush lost his Heisman Trophy, and then they ended up giving him back like later when NIL came.
Yeah. So, athletes like no money, right? No rights.
You couldn't get caught getting money.
Everyone got money. And then they said, you know what? Name, image, likeness. You can get paid for your name, image, likeness, which is supposed to mean you can get paid for, wearing, whatever, Nike tee or whatever it is, and they can give you a contract. what it really was is like, and they've done research on this, like 90% of that money is really pay for play. You're getting paid to play either from the school or from like the school's donors, right? These people, the boosters, the people that, you know, support these schools financially. They're now just putting money in the kids' pockets, basically saying like, hey, if you play for this school, you know, you're kind of getting a salary, but there's no protections for the athlete. You know, they don't have, some of those contracts are really poorly written and worded. And then you have these inexperienced agents coming in representing athletes that are, you know, taking money. Athletes are bouncing between schools 3 times in a season. And so you're kind of, it's the Wild West. Like you're getting paid to play, but there's not really protections for the schools to maintain these athletes. There's not protections for the athletes. And now there's like a new lawsuit where there, a new settlement that was just happened within the last like month in the NCAA, where athletes can now get officially paid for play through the school. So there's a bunch of schools that have this like minimum, a maximum, of amount of money that they can pay directly to athletes. But it's causing new problems because they're not going all the way in and saying, yes, you are an athlete, you are, whether it's
like
an employee or contractor,
for the football team.
And so the only solution there, and this is what athletes.org would say, and I would agree with them, is like, hey, let's do this. Let's go all the way. This is a professional sport. Like there's billions of dollars in advertising revenue. And because all these schools are nonprofits, the money before they're making all this money, they'd be like, well, and then they make these like crazy upgrades to their stadiums and their training facilities, and the coaches would be making $5-10 million a year. And now it's like, okay, let's get that money to the athletes, but then let's create an official working relationship where the athletes have a say in what happens next. Like if you're combining conferences, there should be someone in that room that represents the athletes, whether it's a currently competing athlete, a former athlete, or just someone that they know is there to represent them, that they've, you know, voted in or it's been voted in by a group that they voted in. And then, if that person does a bad job, you vote them out. But they are in that room specifically to make sure that athletes are getting a good shake whenever there's, you know, changes being made.
Yeah. So that's like a little bit of a different beast because there is, like you said, billions of dollars of ad revenue. It's been going on.
Little different.
Yeah, a little different. And it's also been going on for probably, I mean, I don't know how long NCAA football's been going on, decades, but like decades longer than CrossFit.
At least the 70s.
Yeah, so they've had tons of time to kind of evolve their models, and the sport gets familiarity, viewership. So like when you're talking to that group, what's like the actionables that you're like, all right, this is what I'm taking to PFAA, where I think this could help with the professionalism of our architecture when we're not yet at that like tier yet.
Yeah.
Or maybe there is none. Maybe it's just like
there is and there isn't. It's interesting. And so, you know, what they said is they're like, when you go to athletes, you actually speak to them and what do they want? Sometimes the NCAA, the ones that are like resistant to change, you go to individual schools and the people running those programs, they're like, yeah, like, let's do this. Let's change this. Yeah. Right. You go to the athletes and they also are saying, hey, let's change this. Let's upgrade this. And also the athletes are saying, listen, I don't want all the programs that aren't making money to all of a sudden get cut, like the rowing team or the badminton team. They don't want that. They should still have, you know, the same access that they have now or even a little more. But if you're, you know, men's basketball and you're drawing in this money, they're like, we should get some of that money and we should also get some additional, you know, protections. And so, but then at the highest level, maybe the NCAA, they're just resistant to some of that change. And that's the same in tennis right now. And the PTPA. And what's interesting about tennis is when I first started the Athlete Association, I would refer to athletes forcing change for the good in the sport. In the 1970s, they did a Wimbledon lockout, which made a lot of positive impact on the athletes. And they created the first ever world rank because athletes were frustrated, among other things, that some of the invitations were being done subjectively and not objectively to who gets to go to these best tournaments, among a bunch of other things. And then again, in the 90s, there was, you know, reform that helped the ATP and WTA women's tennis. But now again, you know, so we look at this, we go, oh, I wish our sport was more like tennis. But you speak with the players in tennis and there's still issues. And so it's not like there's this promised land, right? Yeah. It's about setting up a foundation and a structure for continual improvement so that athletes, I mean, here it is, right? The PFAA, our vision is to see a future where athletes are competing on the world's biggest stages and they're empowered with a strong voice that can shape the trajectory of the sport and their own careers. And like, I'm not always going to be able to do this. I'm going to have to move on, or I'm going to get hit by a bus. And so,
knock on wood,
knock on wood. But the PFAA has to survive without just me. And so I need to set it up for that. Sports governance is a part of that. Athletes having protections. And we do that with like these 3 critical pieces. One of those is advocacy and representation. Another one is athlete education, support services. And the third one is exposure and earning opportunities. And so those are those key 3 elements that we know are important. Athlete advocacy and representation, we can get into the details of all of these, but the 2 big ones right now, we're working with the Functional Sport Safety Working Group, and that's led by Hicks, who's at a lot of major events. And really it's to make sure that
I've never heard of them. Who are they?
Yeah, so that group is new. Like, that group is new of the release of this. There's a new website and stuff. But really what that is it's getting professionals that understand safety to have really robust safety plans. They can enact them. Athletes can have a voice in upgrading those.
Is this a PFAA branch, or is this something the PFAA is working alongside?
We're supporting them.
Like, you're part of this working group?
Yeah, no, we're not part of it. The working group are professional medics.
Oh, okay.
Like, they are safety experts.
Yeah.
And then the PFAA, we've been supporting them for months, like, to build this working group, to help them get their first meeting, to build the website, to understand, like, okay, is it a working group? Is it a council? Is it a 501c3? Is it a 501c6? So we're kind of figuring out that.
Yeah.
You know, we've been helping them through that. And now that it exists, they're starting to have meetings, and then we're going to plug in athletes that are experienced that want to help guide their safety planning, which will be at, you know, dozens, if not more, events in the next few years. They will be either boots on the ground, or competition can reach out to them and say, hey, we've, you know, got someone who's experienced in medical, but not maybe so much in like fitness. You know, what do you recommend? What are some best practices? And then they can help them. And so It's a place where events can go to access.
It's like competitions getting their L1.
Yeah, sort of.
Like
and
get your safety L1.
Yeah.
Will it be a safety certification, or be like,
No,
they would
not a
work with
certification.
Wadapalooza to be like, hey, the end lines of where the barricades are need to be X number of feet away from the floor so the bar doesn't hit it.
Moving
like
towards that.
That type of.
Yeah, moving
okay.
towards that. And so like Hicks, you know, for example, Hicks is a person, his name is, and I always think it's either Josh Hicks or Graham Hicks. I always mess this up because
Josh.
It's Josh. Sorry,
Okay.
It is Josh, because Graham Hicks is a strongman, and whenever I see Hicks, I mess it up and I overthink it. It's a going
Cut
joke.
this out. I'm just kidding.
So yes, it is Josh Hicks. So he is the head medic at Wadapalooza, World Fitness Project, Mayhem Classic,
He's been
Road
around
Invitational, everywhere, right? And so that's one way we advocate and represent athletes. Another way is our collaboration with the AFJ, which is, you know, getting more consistent movement standards. We can dive into that.
AFJ is Association of Fitness Judges.
Association of Fitness Judges. And so that's the athlete's ability to impact the best practices at events. And simply put, when we look at advocacy and representation, we want events to have really clear rules and for those to be consistently enforced. It's like pretty simple, right? And then for athletes,
simple to say out loud.
Simple to say out loud. Hard
We
to
found
implement.
out that it's a lot harder.
But yeah, it's just like, hey, we want really clear, really robust rules. We want those enforced consistently.
Yep.
And long-term moving forward, we want to make sure that athletes have the ability to impact the best practices to adjust those. And that happens in other sports, right? If you're like, I think I used an example, but you know, even in hockey, it's like, hey, you know, we're getting checked from behind. We want to protect athletes so they're not getting concussions by getting a stick to the back of the head.
Yep.
There needs to be a rule in place to protect us from that.
Yeah.
So
it's
like in
that
the
same
NBA
thing.
right now, hey, we want to travel, so let's make some new bullshit rule where it's called the gather.
It's not 2 steps, it's 5.
No, now it's 5.
Did they lengthen it?
Yeah, they're
Well,
like they've never.
I mean, they've never called traveling anyways,
Yeah,
but still.
Yeah, but they've never called the gather, and now when you turn it on, they're always bringing up he started the gather. It's like, bro, this man's traveling.
Let's not get into that. Let's not get into that. So that's advocacy and representation, and then direct services. That's stuff that comes directly from the athlete association to directly help the members of the association. And so membership in the PFA, I guess that's kind of part of it. We're looking to represent, and we do represent, the best athletes in the sport. So we have 107 active members. This is as of just before semis, so it's changed a bit. We have to email some of the new athletes. But basically, I think 89% of eligible athletes are currently active voting athletes.
And your eligibility requirements are like 2-year rolling back games.
Yeah, basically,
I don't know all
if
the
you've
details,
done,
but
if you've
like
done
that.
really well, and our bylaws are public, so you can go and look it
Yeah.
up if you want. if you've done really well at a high level competition, you are eligible to PFA member. We're going to reach out to you. You're going to be a PFA voting member, so you can vote in the new board. And then you have access to these direct services. And then as we advocate for you at these events, some athletes are going to be like, oh, good luck with that. Some are going to want to say, hey, yeah, I'd love to be on those calls. I'd love to impact movement standards. I'd love to be part of safety discussions. You're never going to have all athletes do that. It's just not in everyone's nature. But the ones that do, they're going to have the ability to do that. And so the numbers there, it looks something like about 60 men and 60 women around the world that are, the best in the sport. And it's sort of a rolling 2-year window. And we took that a bit from the PTPA. It's hard because in something like NHL, it's simple. It's like, do you have a contract? Like if you're on a team with a contract, you're in the NHL Players Association. You just immediately you're in.
Same thing with the NFL Players Union, right? It's like a
any
union.
team sport.
Yeah,
it's
Canadian.
Very,
He's Canadian.
Yeah,
oh, yeah. Sorry.
It's very clear cut who is
CFL,
who is playing, and then but once you retire, there's usually like a not veteran. What's the word when you retire? Retirement, whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever.
When you retire.
When you retire. You can still access some of that. Obviously, like something like a pension, sometimes still health benefits.
Yeah.
But with us, we have to draw a line somewhere. And that doesn't mean if you're, 61st best male, we've helped some athletes with visa applications and stuff that are just outside that, but just to kind of connect them with people or write a letter of recommendation. So direct services. And so some of those direct services look like the ones we have now. I can talk about those, and then we can talk about the vision for that. But so mindset performance assistance. So we have Con Porter has something called I Am Athlete, and it's basically mindset performance for competitive athletes. And he's offering that for free for PFA members, one-on-one and some group stuff. But one-on-one is mostly what athletes are using right now, which is great. And we're looking for some more. We have more mental performance coaches that have reached out that want to assist. I think it's great having a former athlete because he gets it.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, I know what it's like.
The pressure, the stress, all of it.
Yeah. I know what it's like a week out thinking I haven't done enough burpees, or when the workouts are not announced thinking I'm not going to be good enough. And so he can relate to that. Yes. But at the same time, maybe there's people that don't want to speak with someone there. Maybe there's 1 degree of separation there. So having more options for that. Another one is we have a medical insurance alternative for PFA athletes that live in the US. And so that comes from the CrossFit Medical Society. That's brand new as of the podcast, basically.
So is CrossFit Medical Society part of CrossFit?
I think it's more of a license. They sort of license that word.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's basically what CrossFit Medical Society is up until right now was if you're an affiliate owner, it's an alternative to medical insurance in the U.S. Now, I'm Canadian, so my understanding of the medical system here is a little not great. So that's why Grace has been handling this. She's on the PFA executive. Yeah. But basically, there's a monthly fee minimum, and then it's sort of a version of a deductible, but it's an alternative to medical insurance. It's actually pretty good, and it's quite intuitive. It's quite unique, and it's for fit people, and because fit people probably aren't going to rack up crazy medical
premiums
bills.
Are lower and all that stuff.
Premium and they're not quite premiums. It's different than that, but it's a good start, and we're looking into more. One of the things as well we want to have, if nothing else, just as a resource, is just links to travel insurance. So even for myself, when I competed, I bought additional travel insurance when I was competing as a professional-ish athlete coming to the States or going to Dubai. I bought a little bit extra in case something happened there. I'd have this card that was international. And so you're just having links to that. So if you're an athlete coming from somewhere in Europe or Canada or Australia, you're traveling around, just knowing that there's some options there and you don't have to go and do the research yourself. It's okay, this is whatever, a couple $100 might be a good idea. And then obviously for Americans, the healthcare systems here, all countries are different. So it does make it complicated for us, but just in improving that. And then another direct service, I'm really rattling these off here, financial services. It's all up here.
Well, it's good though, because it's nice to know what's
people kind of know what need to kind of know what it is.
And so financial services, simplest thing there is tax education. So if you're an athlete, you've been training really hard, then all of a sudden you make your first check. You go to Wadapalooza, you win whatever, couple $1,000.
Do they just send you a 1099? They send you the money with a 1099?
Well, it depends. That's the thing. I would get a W-8 Benny. If you're an American, you'd get a W-8 Ben. So you might get that and go, Like, what is this?
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
and they might not need to know they need to pay taxes on it.
The athletes, the athletes wouldn't know. I mean, I've heard stories even from 10 years ago of, you know, an athlete going to Dubai and just getting the cash and spending it, and then you come
having
home
a tax bill.
Yeah, then you have this tax bill, whether you're American or European. You go, oh, I have to claim. You know, so that's just some education on that, or some numbers, you know, to call, like, people to look out for. We've got a relationship with an American-based financial advisor group that they're also just like money management stuff. So if an athlete is financially doing well and they want some more assistance, or, you know, they can help actually set you up with someone with taxation advice, is pretty good. Most of our membership, there's a lot of Americans, of course, but yeah, sort of expanding that, and even just some free resources like Beck Bodie, that's the name of them. They've just helped with some written documents and some videos on like basic sort of financial advice and tax advice.
Are y'all going to launch a coin? PFAA coin?
A crypto coin?
I will. No, that's
Brent has left the space a billionaire.
Look,
Ponzi
man,
schemed everyone.
Let's. You know what?
If you want to
start a
finish,
scam, let's just straight up. We are
let's
money
cancel
laundering.
this podcast and do that.
if you want to finish this podcast, I demand that you make a PFAA coin.
I have a question. So, like, this sounds like a lot of good stuff. What has been? You have that eligible membership group. I forget the number you said. But like, what percentage of people are like actually taking advantage, using this, actively involved on a regular basis, calling you up? Like, sounds like you're hustling. Yeah. But how much are you actually getting the traction of the people that you're representing?
That's a great question. Probably, I mean, with I Am Athlete, that's very new as well. A lot of this stuff is really new.
You just like announcing
just within the last
stuff,
month, right? Some of this stuff has become available because we've been planning it all. So with I Am Athlete, we're intentionally I don't know, because we're making sure the connection is there. So an athlete doesn't have to come to me and say, Brent, I'm mentally struggling.
Got it.
Can you know, we want to set that up. We are going to get numbers from him. So at least it's like, hey, have you gotten 2 athletes or 20, you know? I think the numbers right now are probably low. Right?
And on all the stuff.
On all the stuff. Yeah, it would be low.
I assume part of the reason you're here and at Mayhem is you're trying to launch this thing and get it kicking again.
Yeah, it's single digits for sure. But it's just, you know, it's me, that's my job, is to show the importance of that to the athletes continually through, you know, emails and calls and showing up to events in person. And if I can think of an athlete, I'm like, oh, this athlete's pretty new. Like, who's their agent? Hey, make sure the agents know. And that's a big thing too, is there's most of our athletes have an agent or a manager. And then when you kind of look at that, you're like, oh, there's really, you know, half dozen agents that represent the majority of these. So if they really understand these services as well, and they know the athlete needs them, and that's really the whole point. Like, an athlete association, there's all these players in this ecosystem, and there's event organizers, there's athletes, there's maybe agents, there's coaches, there's training camps, and an athlete association is like an important piece of that. And some of these things, specifically some of the direct services, those aren't things that you're realistically going to get anywhere else unless you just do them yourself, which most people won't. Yeah.
Have you gotten, I feel like, I know the Castro demand thing was a huge controversial point. CrossFit came out with their announcement to not be transparent, and then built their own advisory group of athletes inside. There were, I mean, it didn't sound like it from your podcast with Mayhem, but there was definitely criticism openly about PFAA not knowing what it was prior to this. Has any of that like controversy stopped or blocked you, or got in the way, or changed your direction, trajectory? Even like WFP popping up, one of the big kind of, I wouldn't say like heavily with you, but I definitely was really involved like in the earlier years of PFA, because I believe in that whole idea of professionalism. And then the WFP comes out, and like one of the biggest things I think athletes associate with professionalism, which I think is maybe mistaken, is how much money they're making in today. They're like, oh, well, it's professional because I'm making money. But their professionalism from a long-term perspective is more about infrastructure and, you know, having rules, structure, media guidelines, and WFP kind of solved some of those things. Like, did any of the market dynamics kind of change your like, well, this is my mission, or you got to kind of pay attention to it and rescope along the way? Yeah,
that's a good point. I think if I just answer the professionalism. So to me, professionalism means 2 things. Like, money is part of that. And then just, let's say I act professionally, right? I'm organized. I am consistent. Like,
clear communication.
Yeah, that is like a person being professional. And then, the money is part of that as well. And I think it's hard to have, if you just have one of those, like, then the other one probably isn't going to last. So if you just start, you know, athletes like, great, I'm getting paid, but you go, okay, is that long-term? And that's part of, the job of the PFA is to not just think about the current athlete, but think about the 19-year-old who's coming up, and is this set up for them? And if the sport really grows, are we set up for that? Or if the sport even shrinks, are we well set up for that? And like, I think a lot of those pieces that need to be there, specifically around like, sports governance, and even just athletes having a seat at the table.
Yeah.
Right. Athletes having a seat at the table when changes are made to the season again.
Yeah.
Right. Or, updated movement standards or whatever it is. Is there someone in there that is, whether it's an actively competing athlete, that can't always be the case, but someone that the athletes can trust? And hopefully that's me right now. But again, long-term, I can't do this forever. And so making sure there's a system set up where athletes can vote someone in, and that typically can't be a competition organizer. Like, it just can't be, because they're going to have their own, priorities, and they need to make the company money. So the likelihood of athletes, especially a young athlete, being comfortable going to, whether that's, Dylan Malitsky at Wadapalooza, or Dave Castro at the CrossFit Games, or Will Moore at World Fitness Project, or, even Rich Froning directly at the Mayhem Classic. Yeah. That might be challenging. They're like, oh, if this conversation doesn't go well, what's that going to mean for my relationship with this event? It's a lot easier to have that person in the middle. And that's where an athlete association comes in. And then it becomes easier, because if you have every event or every little tournament series has their own internal athlete council, it's like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Like, how, like, now each athlete has to have a relationship with each head of each athlete council. It's not efficient.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I agree. So it's kind of important then, in the new landscape of what you're doing, to try to get the athletes on board, not thinking they're aligning with a CrossFit advisory board or WFP advisory board, or an advisory board that's only going to work with Rogue, but really like anybody that does functional fitness as a sport. PFAA is trying to be like competition agnostic. It's like what you're trying to put in place can expand through all the competitions.
Yeah, that'd
not
be the
just
hope.
that's
and
like your ideal.
Yeah, ideal. And I'm not going to say like we're there yet, right?
Yeah.
But it's laying that foundation and hopefully providing enough value, not only through direct services, but then some of these other initiatives like the movement standards, functional sport safety working group, where as those things, continue to show like actionable value, athletes will buy in more and more, events will see the value in it more and more, and get tangible value out of what we're doing. And we've seen that at Wadapalooza. I think that's like a really good example of when athletes have an impact and a voice in improving best practices at an event. Dylan will say like, the expansion of our relationship from 2024 to 2025, we added like practical real value in the lead up and at the event that they didn't have otherwise.
Nice.
Which we're really proud of.
Yeah.
And I think that's like an example. And, even AFJ at some of the events they've went to, like they provided, actionable real value, and those judges are getting better because of them, and the events are developing a better relationship with those judges. And so that's like a good proof point that it can be done.
You actually judged at Wadapalooza, didn't you?
I did.
Was it just a picture of you on Instagram, or you like actually got in a heat? And
I got in
like a legit judge.
Yeah, I think I was.
What was your perspective on that?
It's hard.
It is.
It's really hard. And I knew it was hard.
Were you in an elite division though? Or
no.
Okay. So if you do it with people that move as fast as you do, I feel like even harder.
Oh,
like I don't think I almost always avoid open judging because of that. I'm like, I don't want to miscount double unders. Yeah. I don't want to invalidate my people's videos.
Yeah, it's tough. I think so. Yeah, I was on I think it was a podcast on Saturday, and someone joked, it was with the AFJ, and they said, oh, you should judge a heat. And I said, let's do that. And so then the next morning, it was a team of 3. It was like RX men. They were pretty good.
Yeah.
They could do everything. And so it was like wall balls, synchro toe to bar, worm lunges. It was a faster workout. And so I judged at least 3 heats, maybe 4 heats of men. It was fun. It's hard.
Yeah. What did you learn?
What did I learn? I mean, it was as hard as I expected. I definitely wasn't thinking it was going to be a cakewalk. I think the hardest thing was so I felt like I did a pretty good job of like just judging and counting. It was the remembering to put my hands up, remembering to say no rep and do the hand motion. Ideally, when you say no rep, you give 1 or 2 words to describe to them why they got the no rep. So in a wall ball, no rep, target. No rep, depth, or toe to bar. No rep, make it synchro. No rep, feet didn't touch. Like you're doing that. which I didn't do ever.
That's so hard. And then you got to also keep track of count. And if they go 2 in a row, mistakes, it's way more challenging of a task.
Yeah, you're 19, 20, no rep synchro, 21, doing that. And then I was inconsistent with the wall balls. It was 150, making sure maybe just yelling out every 10, right? 10, 20. And then at the last 10 counting down, I didn't do a great job of that. I was like 12. 33, 34, 35, 52. It was very all over the place. So I think I did a pretty good job of just like keeping count and saying no rep, and then keeping count with the no rep, but then just moving. Yeah. So as soon as they finish the wall ball, moving to the next position, not too fast, but not too slow. And staying, ahead. So just those kind of the dance of it all.
Yeah. And there's like logistics considerations if they're filming media on the floor and there's camera people on the floor. Yeah.
It's a hard, I think refereeing or judging in every sport is hard, and ours is, there's got to be some that are easier than ours.
Well, there definitely is, because there's no standardization in ours, so the judges can't practice. It's like, oh, well, we just changed the rule again. So if you've been practicing these words to delineate a no rep from a real rep, and now we just changed the standard, any practice you have to tighten that process up is now, well, you're like back to ground zero. You got to have new words, new cues. So that's why I've always been on board with like the movement standardization, selection,
it's a good place to start.
Rules.
There's so many things in our sport, from a governance, a standardization, consistency, organization, whatever. If you just look at like what's happening on the floor, you could talk about media, you could talk about whatever, but just on the floor, I think movement standards is the most important place to start. And so a good segue. And so I spoke about movement standard, themovementstandards.com on the Mayhem podcast. I didn't do a great job on there. I think I should have done a better job really shouting out the AFJ.
We'll give you a second chance.
Here's your meatball. But like the AFJ has done like so much work on it. Behind the scenes, there's like over 250 standards. They've got like a really strong working draft on that they've already used at some competitions. And they're going to continue to collaborate with competitions coming up and like refining those. And the PFAA is working collaboratively with them on this. It's very much a joint initiative.
Is the AFJ working with the WFP, and is the WFP's movement standard list and stuff any similar at all to this, or no?
No.
Okay.
I mean, there are judges at World Fitness Project that are AFJ judges, but it's not an official partnership.
Not like AFJ
that I'm aware of.
Yeah. Okay.
But maybe there's room for that in the future.
Yeah.
And so hold on. Now I lost my train of thought.
Movementstandards.com.
Movementstandards.com. So we've been working collaboratively on it. It's obviously super important for judges, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
If the judges, if the standard keeps changing, how are they going to be successful? And then it's important for athletes to really, it's less about learning a new standard. It's really almost more about the judges, because we just want to make sure that, is the guy next to me going to get the same no reps if he's doing the same thing as me? Like that's what's important to athletes. And some form of consistency so we could practice would be nice. Not necessary, because we do like doing new things. But it's really the consistent application on the floor that becomes the issue, online and in person.
Well, I would say the consistent application of the communication is just important for an athlete as well. Because if let's say you get a no rep and you have an inconsistent communication in terms of them calling out like depth or whatever, and they don't say something, and then you do another rep, and had you heard something the same way from the judge, you could have fixed it. That could end up costing people a lot. Like just having like hey, here's the rule and the standard, and if the standard's not met, here are the words that we use. It could make it actually better for the athlete, because the experience then in any lane is good. People that speak other language can know what those target words are as well. Like I know when people come to Wadapalooza from Latin America or Asia or whatever, oftentimes they get a judge that doesn't speak the language. But if you had a list of words that were used to delineate, you could potentially have somebody that's not fully multilingual, like do that for people there.
So, I don't think that having that list of words is a priority right now.
It's more like a vision.
But making more consistent, that's like another level of depth that won't come right away. But so the AFJ, they have these competitions they're working with, and that's going to continue to refine this. And so the actual like layout of it and the release of it, it's going to be slow. It's going to take time, but it is happening behind the scenes. We're going to, kind of keep drip feeding it together collaboratively to give the people what they want, and then figure out how that looks like from I think I was probably a little too bold on the Mayhem podcast about the rollout of it and how it's going to be used. But
what do you mean too bold?
Not too bold. I think just making sure that, like, part of it is like making sure the AFJ's vision of how to roll it out and to make sure it's effective.
Yeah.
So that it's publicly available to events, because long term that is the goal, right? Because in other sports, the rules aren't like privately held.
USGA has golf rules that are
they're
just
public.
there.
Yeah, so you and I could run a tournament and just copy paste and just do it. But making sure that, I also want as many events as possible, quite frankly, to partner with the AFJ if that's a possibility for both of them.
Yeah.
And so making sure that those movement standards work for them and that it's a collaborative effort is like super important to the PFA as well.
All right, so you are way more connected to athletes than I am, and you've been politicking around. I mean, I'm connected to the athletes I coach and that I educate. But
the best athletes are training think tank athletes, you too for just $9.99.
He's actually here to promo our stuff. One of the things I just don't understand is like, why is there any resistance at all to this idea of standardization of movement?
I don't think there
rules?
really is.
Okay, there is not.
I don't think so.
Okay,
but
it seems like there's a pushback against like you're denaturing the sport, or you're getting rid of the like, hey, we can kind of like change everything
athletes.
on. Okay,
I don't think from athletes, and some of that could stem from a misunderstanding if people think that it's like Brent only wants back squats in a air-conditioned room.
You're making everyone soft.
That's what I want.
Then I participate.
It's hot outside.
Yeah, and there's nothing ever new, and every workout's announced 6 months in advance, and and it's going to be cold and boring. That's not what I want at all. So maybe there's a little bit of that as a misunderstanding. I think I would probably like more unknown and unknowable than most people, to be honest.
But you just don't want those variables to be unknown and unknowable. You're like, hey, if you're doing a wall ball, it could be 1,000 of them, it could be 100 of them, whatever, but it's a wall ball.
Yeah, well, and I think what's frustrating for me and for athletes in general is once you get a standard that's working and then you go to some different event and they use a standard that is inferior, that maybe we used to use a few years ago, and you go, guys, like, there's a reason. And even like, I'll give an example. I don't know the best standards for worm clean and jerks. I don't.
Because you didn't do enough team stuff.
I don't do enough team stuff. Yeah. There's, half dozen movements you do consistently with a worm, with a team of 4, team of 3. I do not know the best standards for those worm movements and how to move that bag between rounds and like, what are the rules for that? So if I was to run say someone paid me and said, Brent, we're doing a worm competition. I want you to do the events. Where do I go to know what those best worm standards are
right now?
Genuinely.
Yeah.
I don't like,
I mean, I'd talk to people that competed on teams.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Which is great. But at the same time, there should be a better way of doing that. Yeah. And the problem is I might go to some website. Maybe it's Wadapalooza. Maybe it's like a games workout from 5 years ago where they actually had the written standards up, or regionals. But maybe if I went and talked to a games team athlete right now, like Taylor Williamson, who's super experienced, and I wrote that, she'd be like, Brent, that one sucks. I'd be like, oh, why?
Yeah.
And I don't even know.
Yeah.
And so that's crazy, right? Yeah. That's crazy. Yeah. So that's kind of the long-term vision of that, is to do that. And I think all athletes I've ever spoken to want that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe that's just like the internet that I'm feeling has hesitation to the movement thing more than athletes.
It's a feeling that it's the slippery slope fallacy, where, we have a standard for a wall ball that's like strong. And again, that's not even where I want to go, where, there's some sort of iron gavel where if you do any fitness competition around the world, if you don't use this standard, we're going to get you.
Yeah. I think 2 years ago when you were on our podcast and we were talking movement standards, wasn't it you who mentioned, or, in the example of a wall ball, you would have a few wall ball standards. So it's not like you're locked into just one, but the ones that are available are locked in.
Yeah. You said that on the podcast.
Yeah, I said, too. So wall ball, probably just one, but maybe handstand push-up like 2 or 3. Because there's different situations, online, in person, sometimes like walking lunges, you probably have at least 2, probably more like 3 or 4, just because of little subtle variations that, again, someone with a lot of experience is going to understand. Someone who's just running a comp for the first time in, I don't know, South Africa might not even know that there are options and why you should choose one standard over another. So they might copy and paste one they've seen. It's like, that's actually not best for your layout and, you know, maybe the caliber of athlete you have or the caliber of judge you have. So I don't think, so again, slippery slope fallacy, the belief that like that, you know, more consistent movement standards, it's not even like force, but just generally speaking, more consistent movement standards or a library will somehow lead to, you know, like boring events that never change and, you know, a complete lack of new movements and, you know, no surprise announcements or something like that, which it's not the case. Yeah.
If you like best case scenario world, let's say 5 years from now, PFAA is the governing body.
So we're not a governing body. That's the big thing. So we don't want to be a governing body.
The athlete advocacy group.
Yes.
Okay. The athlete advocacy group of the entire functional fitness space. And you guys have control.
Not control, just the ability to impact best practices.
Okay.
Right.
So the movement standard things.
Yeah.
Would that be controlled by PFA or would that be the AFJ?
Either AFJ or like a governing body.
Okay.
Right? So maybe that's IF3.
Okay.
Right.
So let's say that maybe this is then your opinion and not related to PFA because PFA's purview wouldn't be this. But let's say there were 2 handstand push-up standards that were approved. All the athletes were down with whatever. New competition comes on board and they're like, hey, we got a new thing we want to try. Would there potentially be like a process for them to like submit, hey, here is this test, here's masters athletes doing it, here's it done at speed, here's what our recommended rules are, you get an approval and maybe it goes into the database, or that group would just be in charge of setting it up? Like,
I mean, I think we're so far as a sport from that.
Yeah.
I think is probably the first thing to say, because right now, what does that look like? The event just does it.
Yeah. Whatever they want.
Which is fine. But at the same time, if that standard isn't done well, who are the ones that, you know, take the bad end of that? It's the judge. They might get made fun of, right?
I think the athletes suffer the most.
Probably suffer the most because they go, oh man, I spent all this time training for this and I had a bad experience, or I felt like I should have been 5th and I slipped down to 8th because my judge had no idea what was going on and da-da-da. And then also the fans, because they're watching it going, wait, what is it? Like, what is this? Why didn't that one count? Why did that one count?
Yeah.
And then maybe the announcer goes, I don't know either.
Yeah.
And you're like, great.
I get what you're saying, but can you just give me one example of this even happening?
Of this happening?
In terms of reps?
It was sarcasm.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I
thought the same thing. I was like, Chris, have you been here these last couple of years? What's going on?
Your face. That's the intro.
Like, how much time do we have?
Shit.
That's like, I mean, I'll give you the very first CrossFit regionals I ever went to. We did a brief for the toes to bar. And they said the rep starts with the feet behind the plane of the bar. You must then contact with both feet to the bar. And the rep ends when the feet swoop back under the bar. Someone raises their hand. So if we just touch the bar on the last rep of the set and jump down, that last rep won't count. And everyone's looking at each other. That's not how we do the toes to bar. Like you finish the last rep. It's like a chest to bar. You just finish it and you drop.
Yeah.
And we're like, that's not how we just did it in the open. That's not how we did it in the year before that in the open. We had to work out. And everyone's kind of arguing. And then, nope, that's how we do it. I'm thinking, what is going on here? And then they like, hold on a second. And then they went and they chatted. Okay, the rep ends when you touch your feet to the bar. And so, you know, it did get better. But that was my first ever competition.
I mean, ring handstand push-ups at the games, Strickman muscle-ups, and Nate. Like, anytime they've rolled out something new that had kind of a subjective standard, I feel like there's been issues on this front.
So, new stuff for sure. I think an example, and I'll get to the new stuff like, you know, again, Magic Wand 5 years from now. But if we're just talking about movement standards like recently. So in 2016, we had a double dumbbell power clean in the open. And it was a good standard. Dumbbells touch the ground at lockout, knees lockout, hips lockout. And then it's like, okay, what's front rack? Front rack was defined as a portion of the dumbbell must pass behind the plane of the center of the shoulder. So it's just sort of like sneak behind that center and bring it back down and like on top of or above the shoulder. Okay, great. 2021 online quarterfinals, they had a very similar movement. It was the dumbbell hang power clean. And so the bottom of the rep was considered hang, which could be between the legs or outside the legs, which was fine. And then at the top, at lockout, they said dumbbell to the shoulder. That was it.
Yeah, it just had to touch, right?
Well, again, it just said dumbbell to shoulder, and I think they had a single image. The image was of someone like with a really nice lockout way back.
Yeah.
And so I'm reading that, and there's not a video showing good reps, bad reps. So I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm just going to do the standard we did in 2016 just to be safe. But there were athletes that just tapped it to their delt or tapped it to their pec, right? Which is like your upper pec is like kind of the shoulder, and no one got no reps for it. And we asked them in a meeting, like, hey, you had this perfectly good standard in 2016. You could have just copy and pasted it, right? And then just changed from the hang to the floor. So that's an example of where these movement standards could come in where, you do have a new movement, and hopefully if this list is really robust, it's probably going to be similar to another movement that's already in there. Yeah. So you copy, paste, you change a few things. That's the actionable usage of it in the next, couple of years as we roll it out. Long term, I don't know. I don't like thinking too long term because there's just so much to do right now.
Yes, I got it. You got an overwhelming pile.
Yeah, there's like just this, and this is just this. Collaborating with the AFJ on this is like enough to keep us busy for a long time. But pie in the sky. It's really just. Really, it'd probably be the creation of a short little one pager on, hey, if you're adding in a new movement, here's what it looks like. Here's what you can do. Like, here's like, make sure you do this, make sure you do that. We had a call once with CrossFit after the V-Up, right?
That one was
online quarterfinals 2023.
I remember.
They had a written standard, which wasn't very thorough. They had 2 photos, and there were, athletes were trying to figure out what to do. People did the workout. They had a bunch of penalties. Then they reversed a bunch of those penalties, said, you know what, like, everything's fine.
Yeah.
We had a call with them after, and we said, hey, you had the crossover single unders that year, and that was a really good standard. And you also gave us a short video explaining how to count the reps, which really, really helped.
Yeah.
Would it be possible moving forward as part of your internal best practices, whenever you have a new movement for an online competition, can you provide a video? I feel like that would, save you guys a lot of time with appeals and reviews and then having to announce, all that stuff and the controversy around that. And it would obviously help athletes a lot just to just compete and do our best.
And they told you were dumb and said no?
in different words, but it was basically, it was essentially like, well, what you don't understand is, and they had their reasons. And it was basically like, we can't commit to that best practice. We'll see what we can do.
Do you think it was because of a time and resource thing, or like,
I don't know.
Because that sounds like super cool to me.
Yeah, and I think if you spoke with any athlete, they'd think that was like a net positive thing. And maybe it's a time, or it's probably that. It's just, hey, we're doing this stuff last minute.
Yeah.
So I think what we're asking is like, could you not do it last minute? This is really important. Athletes train all year to try to make semis. Yeah. And those penalties and those movements just mean a lot. And we're not training last minute. We're training all year.
Do you think if they, let's say magically tomorrow they had FU money and tons of time, do you think that then when you brought that, it would have been like, oh yeah, that is cool, we should do that?
I don't know. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. They like CrossFit?
Yeah.
I don't know. It'd be good. That'd be great.
Because I just thinking about working here. It's like, we have so much stuff going on all the time. And like, I know for us, like sometimes it's just like, yeah, that is a great idea.
But we can't.
Yeah. Well, and I get that, right? And I understand that. And I think it's just, and I think some of that, in 2016, we'd look past that because we're like, oh, this is so new and this is so exciting. But it's like, okay, at a certain point here, there has to be some planning for some structure and organization, because it's been 10 years since 2016 when we had these issues like the strict ring handstand push-up, and we're still having these same problems. And so that's why, AFJ, PFA, we're just going to roll up our sleeves and just start to lead on our own in hopes it improves things.
Yeah. I have one more question on movement standards, and then I want to move on. The GHD sit-up. Yeah. Froning mentioned something in it, WFP. And I sensed there was like some sarcasm or whatever in his response, but I don't know the detail of it.
You got to tell us what happened.
Well, they were talking about movement standards, and then Froning said something like, oh, like the GHD. And there was sarcasm in what he said. I just don't know fully why, but was it the WFP allowing the hip forward standard?
Yeah, I think
what do you think it should be?
So that's you know what? I think that's a great example of a standard so the GHD, right? The perfect way to do it, the way that it's intended to be done, the L1 and so forth, is like the butt is well off kind of the pad, and that's where your butt should be. The last little while in online or in any competition, it's been, the center of your butt must be on the center of the pad or beyond.
So ambiguous.
Right? It's pretty ambiguous, right? And I remember thinking about this 2 months ago. I think I even messaged someone. You know what was funny? I messaged someone from the AFJ. And I was like, hey, do you have any ideas on this? Like, I'm trying to think of really the only two options I could think of. One of them was let them do whatever they want, which is what they did at World Fitness Project. Yeah. And then you saw people bringing their butt basically next.
On the inside of the pad.
Way on the inside of the pad, like, you know, knees to their chest.
Yeah.
Either it's just that open season, or you keep this butt over the center standard, which is ambiguous, especially for online. Yeah. But either way, like, you're going to be at an online competition. And because I think Mayhem Classic, their standard was sort of like, hey, you know, like, don't do anything too crazy, but, you know, try and keep it on the right side. And it was still all over the place. Yeah. You know, like Haley and James Sprague were, I think, pretty far on the one side. And so it was all over the place.
Yeah, yeah.
So I couldn't think of anything, and neither could they. And then J.R. Howell thought of something, and he put a piece of tape at Syndicate. Did you see that?
No.
Oh, well, there you go. So that's the thing, right? If it's
but then where is the piece of tape?
The piece of tape is on the GHD pad.
Yep.
It is on the center of the pad. All of them are taped the same, and your butt must fully cover the piece of tape for the entire rep.
Your butt has to be on the line.
On the tape line.
While being back and being front. Yeah. Okay.
So it becomes more objective.
Yeah. I mean, I like any objectivity.
Yeah, and
but if the line is on the middle of the pad and your butt is...
It was
like over the crest on the, like, if the foot pad's here and the arch is here, and I was doing GHD sit-ups.
Chris, insert a photo from Syndicate Crown here showing us what the piece of tape looked like.
Well, I guess I could just look later. Yeah.
But again, and JR is going to be helping with the movement standards. I got to get on Shut Up and Scribble and chat with those boys there, because I'm sure they're excited to hound me.
What is he working with? Or how are y'all working together?
JR is just going to add input to the movement standards and just kind of be part of it. He's an experienced competition programmer. Yeah, I really like his work. So I think it'll be just to have, again, because we have the judges with the AFJ, we have the athletes, and kind of get someone in there that sees it from the competition programmer standpoint.
It is kind of funny, though, hearing y'all say that back. Like, it's like, man, what do we do? Tape.
Yeah.
It was right there.
Yeah. It's great, right? And I think it worked pretty well. And so I think it's... you know, and again, someone's probably going to find a way to cheat that, and then you go, crap, and then, you know, you update it. But you know, you're in the space, but you didn't know that, right? And so if you ran a competition in a week, you wouldn't have done that tape line.
Yeah,
just wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
So
I might have done my due diligence to talk to people prior, but maybe not. Maybe not. We'll see. All right, I had these were. Do you have any questions, Chris, or should I jump?
I got one for the end.
Okay. You got the banger ending. Okay, so these are questions all as I was listening to the podcast that you did on Mayhem, and one of the conversations you and Rich had were you being an active athlete when you were running it, and then him saying it should be a former athlete for sure. And I just want to get your kind of take on how important from a leadership perspective, not just on the PFAA, but like in all of these types of things, is it that an active athlete is involved? I didn't have much time, but I looked up like the NFL Players Union. They have an active player who's president, but then they have an executive director who's actually more of a business person. Like they're somebody that knows law, business administration, negotiation techniques. Like they're a business person first. And I actually think you might get more done that way, where you have somebody who's like, hey, I'm an athlete and I'm advocating on the athletic stuff, but then on the business stuff that might be like, all right, well, how do we implement this stuff? Or if there is a fight between athletes and administration, how is it reconciled? That it might be better not to be an athlete. So I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on that. Like, I know you're an athlete, so there maybe is some bias, and I do think that you're well qualified, so I'm not like shitting on you.
Former athlete, but yeah. So we have the active board, and so they are in charge of the vision, right? And
they were voted in now.
They were voted in. So they're voted in by actively competing athletes who vote them in. And then there's the executive team. So for example, Grace Paulus, she's the COO. She has a really great business experience. And so she's not in charge of like, I mean, she can give suggestions, I guess, on like, hey, I think we should do this. But at the end of the day, it is the board who has to decide what we do. We're responsible to them. And so if myself or Grace is not doing good work, like they need to kick us out. Yeah. And then the next people come in. And so, I think what's interesting in our sport is because of the unknown and unknowable nature, there's this like, well, athletes can't be in the room for that. Athletes can't be in the room for that.
Yeah.
And I think actively competing athletes can be in a lot more rooms than they've ever. Well, I mean, quite frankly, athletes have never been part of any meaningful conversation to drive the sport forward in this sport ever.
Yeah.
So it's pretty easy to take at least one step up from that, I think.
Has that changed this year with their CAC?
I mean, I've had some conversations with like Taylor Self, who's on the council, who's super passionate about the sport. Jason Grubb, 5 times CrossFit Games champion for a master. He's on there. He's super passionate. Rich, he's on the safety council. He's not part of the CrossFit Athlete Council.
Oh, okay.
Becca Voigt, Spencer Panchik, Colton Mertens. So there's many others, but like I know they're all super passionate and they want to see it succeed. I don't think that the CAC's set up to succeed, not because of the people on there and their opinions. And I don't think that their opinions are even like being muddied or murky or anything like that. It's just if the system isn't set up for them to succeed. And I mean, as an example, I was speaking with Jason Grubb, and the most important time of the year for masters is the online semis, right? That's like, you know, their biggest event in some ways because that qualifies them directly to the games. It's the only thing that qualifies them. And there were issues or concerns around the voting process and the appeals. And so Jason Grubb, people look up to him, and they, you know, there's a lot of reverence there, and he's a really well-respected masters athlete, super vocal. And he was getting masters athletes reaching out to him in droves, like, hey, can you fix this? Can you help? Whatever. And he reached out to CrossFit, and CrossFit said, well, you guys have a conflict of interest, so we'll talk to you when it's all done. And so they couldn't talk about the appeals or their process. Like, we'll catch it when it's done. We'll catch up. And CrossFit's the one who decides who's on the council, or not decide, sorry. They decide who's eligible to be on the council. They've set that criteria. They decide who's eligible to vote for who's on that council. And they're the ones who take in the votes. So it's not set up to be independent. And now, if you're the one setting the table on who you want to hear feedback from, the most important time of the year to hear feedback is during their most important competition, and you're not taking that feedback. You're not listening to them.
Yeah.
So like that's frustrating. That's not a positive point. Now they have made progress, I think, in some other areas, which is like really good and exciting. And they're all still, from what I understand, like eager and hopeful and passionate to assist. But it's not without its challenges, I think.
Yeah. I had another question about athletes. So Rich said something about safety and then said like athletes should take responsibility for that. I don't know if I fully agree with that. I wouldn't say I'd go so far as disagreeing with it, but I think about like in a fight, you have people in your corner who have a towel where if something gets like out of hand and you know that somebody in that moment is not making sound decisions because they got hit in the head or they're tired. Yeah. I kind of think of CrossFit in the same way. It's not as violent and barbaric, whatever, but like when you're in the heat of doing something that's competitive at the highest level, you're not thinking about your safety. You're thinking about your performance. And I feel like it's almost the job of the organizational bodies, the coaches, the medical staff to preset the athletes up to avoid that. What's your take on that? Like, I know safety is such a big thing. You just kind of offloaded it, but I'm just like, I'm highly in disagreement that people who are mostly like under 25, this is their entire career, making good decisions in that realm. Yeah. It's like, all right, you could advocate for yourself, but like, you might be willing to like do something really stupid that's going to ruin your whole future. And we have experience and foresight to prevent that from happening if we put those guardrails in place.
Yes. So I'm going to quickly just circle back to what we were just talking about to wrap it up, which is like, I think that there's a sweet spot. Like right now, again, I've been voted in as president. I am a former athlete and I'm, working to represent and really set this association up to be successful long-term. And there needs to be that myriad of actively competing athletes. And in a perfect world, it's like athletes from around the world, male and female, some like really fresh in their careers, some at the end of their careers, like that like sweet spot of that feedback. And then people that are like basically doing the bidding of those athletes while still at the same time, someone like myself, if I'm, let's say 100 athletes come to me, in a survey or like, hey, I have a concern, there should be a point where sometimes if an athlete comes to me with a concern, I need to say, listen, like I understand where you're coming from, but you're wrong. And here's why. And then I don't need to bring that to the event.
Yeah.
Right. And like, so I can distill down, hey, event, I've spoken to a bunch of athletes about their frustration about the last competition. So, some of the complaints weren't valid. And this is why, and this is what I told them. The ones that are, here they are. Yeah. So that's part of it. And hopefully that streamlines it for the competition. So they don't need someone like, oh my gosh, I'm filing through all this. And then they start to just disengage. They're like, you know what? These athletes, they don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
So anyway, back to safety. I agree with you, right? I think that, you know, there's this, you know, so if we even just look at the swim, right, at the games, Lazar drowned, right? He was likely tired. He's a good swimmer, so he was likely tired and he drowned. Now, it wasn't that he was tired that allowed him to, how can I put this? What if he got bit by a snake? Or what if he wasn't tired and he just had a rogue cramp in his hamstring and then swallowed some water? It's the same if you're on a run. Like if you say, hey, go on a run and come back, and there's like no one on the run. If there's a blind corner and there's no volunteers and you collapse, whether an athlete
hit your head on a rock,
whether an athlete punched you in the head, whether you rolled your ankle because you weren't paying attention, whether there was a snake bite, whether there was extreme dehydration, like there's all these things that could cause you to be on the ground and need help. When I'm swimming or running at home, it's my responsibility to, like, you know, my wife can paddleboard alongside me my entire swim with a life jacket or something, and I can grab onto her if I'm not feeling safe. Like, that's my responsibility. When you are at a swim at an event, or you're on a run at an event, or even you're, you know, on a competition floor, like, I'm not allowed to have someone next to me on a paddleboard, you know, and even on the run that year, I was planning to have someone pass me ice, and I was going to like put it on my head, and they said no one can pass you anything on the run, and you can't give them anything on the run, so they can't pass you your goggles, or you can't pass them your baseball hat at the end of the run. I was like, oh, bummer, I was going to do that. And I asked, like, hey, how are you enforcing this? Because I'm not going to do it because you told me. I'm going to follow the rules. I'm a rule follower. But like, if someone else gets past a water bottle with electrolytes, I'm like, I was going to do that. I'm not going to anymore. What are you going to do? And they're like, oh, we'll be on it. I'm like, are you though? Like, do you have a means? Don't give me a rule you can't enforce.
Yeah.
Right? It's like over the course of the weekend, hey guys, this whole weekend, no eating strawberries. And you're like, just don't. It's like, well, what, like, we can, you know, different. But, and so again, when I think of safety, it's like, to me, that's it. And then again, there is inherent risk with what we're doing, right?
Yeah,
like
any sport.
You put a heavy barbell over your head and you're tired,
something can
go wrong,
yeah.
You know, and if that you know, if you hurt your elbow, or if it drops on your head or squishes you, like sometimes that's you, but the platform should still be dry.
Yeah.
And there should be someone there, and there's an emergency action plan in place. Like, hey, if someone drops the barbell, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
And in the case of, you know, especially like outdoor events, are we doing everything possible, knowing the conditions, knowing that, you know, there's a variety of caliber of swimmers as well, like that kind of adds into it.
Yeah.
So I don't know if does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. I was just kind of curious if you thought that, because like a lot of this and your kind of skew of all this stuff is allowing athletes a seat at the table, which I'm all for. And I think athletes should have a voice in where they're going. But I also think, and the more I spent time trying to help with the PFAA and trying to help with this kind of sport restructure as it's been happening, I realized over time that athletes do not advocate in their own best interests, and they don't even realize it a lot of times. Some do, and like, you're the professor, and like, you're obviously one of the most cerebral athletes in the sport, but not all athletes are like that. And some are also, you're in your, how old are you? The mid-30s?
Yeah.
Okay, so mid-30s.
Yeah.
Some of these upcoming athletes are 20, don't do that much outside of training inside the gym. So to ask them like, hey, do you understand like what the implications of overheating could be on your body, and like how fast you can overheat and what that could do to you, and if you do have an overheat experience, what it could do to your long term, they don't have the context for understanding to make those decisions. So sometimes I'm like, all right, we got to get people to the table to be able to give insight, but we got to be giving insight on the things that make sense for athletes to do it. And I don't think specific to the safety one, a lot of the stuff that I heard about Lazar and after is like, well, you're competing, so like you got to take responsibility. And I'm like, I don't know, man. I feel like we have a little bit more responsibility as veterans and as people who've seen this and who have experience talking to doctors and stuff to like set that up for success instead of putting any of that onus on an athlete. Like let them just show up and compete. So I just really wanted to get your opinion on it because I heard it and I was like, I don't know if I agree with that necessarily. And maybe it's taken out of context. So I'm not like trying to shit on. I'm not attacking anything he said. I was more just like, oh, that's kind of interesting. I wouldn't look at it that way personally.
Yeah. And I think, with an athlete association, that advocacy, like that's my job to advocate for those athletes who might not yet know better, and maybe they never will, but so that's kind of that sweet spot is showing that value, right, building that trust, and then creating systems that allow athletes to be successful, to be themselves, to compete at a high level. And even speaking to someone else in a professional sport, and it's like, the expectation is I'm going to go out there and I'm going to go crazy, like that's. And you need to set up a situation where it's reasonably safe, for them to do that. And reasonably safe is going to be subjective for sure. Yeah. But having, experienced people in place and defining what that reasonability is with experienced athletes, with experienced safety personnel, and building that. And I think what becomes hard there is I can hear it as I say it for some people is like, well, what about unknown and unknowable? Right? What about unknown and unknowable? And and it's like, yes, but really when you look at what we've done in the past decade, it's pretty known. It's pretty known. It's like there's these 200 or so movements. Sometimes they're indoors, sometimes they're outdoors. They're in a variety of combinations. It's anywhere from a minute to 2 hours. So you can start to, fill out these pretty common situations where you could say, hey, if we were to do a 30-minute workout outdoors, what are the common things that come up? It's like, well, if it's hot, the barbells, anything that's black, cover those up. And, those have been done. Yeah. But again, those are maybe not consistently done at every competition. And there's these hey, if you don't have this amount of safety personnel, you might want to do a 10K trail run. Yeah. But if you just don't have the people out there or the water stations or it's this hot, you're going to do a 1K loop 5 times with burpees or whatever. Right?
Yeah. I don't want to go too much in the past, but just the run loop before the swim this year, was there ice water stations?
Yeah, there were 2.
2? Okay.
I think 2 or 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, then the other thing that I had from the athlete stuff that I've heard a couple of Rich's podcasts, he says, let's get everybody in the same room and talk about this. Who do you think should be in the room? Let's say you got all the relevant, because there's a lot of people who move the market, coaches.
There's a lot of people who want to be in that room.
Yes. Yeah. And sometimes they shouldn't be, coaches have a big influence on athletes. Athletes have a big influence on the media. Brands that pay the athletes have a big say in making sure that there's prize money in there. There's the event organizers that have to, make their version of this sport in a way that they believe it, that can be sold and packaged in media. Then there's judges. So there's a lot of potential people. And I feel like figuring out, one of the comments, it's only been up for 2 hours, but one of the person says he said something like having a United Nations group of people all come together, you think you're actually going to get to a consensus. I find that laughable, but I think that's an important thing is all right, well, if you get people in a room, who's in it? And then when there's conflict, how's that being resolved? Because I feel like from my perspective, the biggest issue is that there's just no clear leadership. From CrossFit's perspective, we kind of understand, but they're no longer leading the sport because they don't get to dictate what Rogue does or what Wadapalooza does or whatever. So when you say who's in charge of this functional fitness type sport, nobody has an answer because there is none. It's well, this person's in charge at this place. This person's in charge at this place. This person has power because if they go to an event, they can get whatever they want and get special treatment. So who would you put in that room?
Gosh.
And you don't need to give specific rooms. Yeah, it could just be groups of buckets.
At a minimum, it's the event organizers at, let's call it the major events, whatever those are, right? Yep. At a minimum, that'd be Rogue Invitational, CrossFit Games would probably be the 2 that come to mind, maybe World Fitness Project, Wadapalooza, right? The biggest events.
Where the best people are.
Yeah, where, and again, there's going to be this, it's going to be this gray area where it's okay, how many of those events? Is it 20? Is it the top 5? Is it whatever. Events.
So you're saying the TTT Super Summer Sizzler doesn't have a seat at the table?
Damn.
The TTT Super Summer Sizzler. I think that what you need, let's say it's just that, event organizers, and then, athletes.
Yeah. What athlete? 5 athletes, 20 athletes, a
well,
top
so
10.
This is where I'm going with that.
side?
And so you could say the same with coaches. You could say the same with agents. You could say whatever. Whoever's there should be responsible to then communicate to a larger group immediately after, and ideally preceding if there was this is going to take time. Like, it's not going to be a single meeting. That's the whole point.
And you're going to get it wrong the first time.
And there was a meeting in 2020 at Boulder in, I think it was September. And I was invited. I wasn't able to go because of COVID restrictions, September, October.
Was it run by CrossFit?
Yeah, it was run by CrossFit. Okay. Yeah. And
I didn't get
nothing came from it, right? Because they didn't follow up with it. And they said, we're going to do more of these. And then it just didn't happen again. Yeah. Because it's going to take time. And there's like, also some of that is like, there's some old wounds, right? And people, there's like older, relationships, emotions, whatever. There's baggage, I guess. And you have to, it's not easy. I think there needs to be like a really strong agenda, and at a minimum event organizers and athletes, but then a specific way in which, and I think the PFA is set up to do that, at least with the top 120 athletes, where we can, preceding that, we could have a meeting or send out an email, or at least like a survey, say, hey, these are the topics we're intending to bring up. These are the topics we're aware of that they're bringing up. This is what we're looking to get out of those. Is there anything else that you want to add? And then, we have to do a good job of communicating after the event, or even preceding, like, hey, I know you said you wanted this. Like, we're not going to talk about that, and this is why. And that's communication, right? Yeah. But I think event organizers and athletes at a minimum. Yeah. And then, again, maybe we're not really ready for this now. In Major League Baseball Players Association, there's a portion of that is coaches and trainers, right? So they represent the coaches and trainers through that as well. We're not at a place like logistically where we can really handle that, although we do our best to communicate when possible.
Yeah, it's like, as a coach, I wanted to help for so long, and I still want to help. I want the sport to succeed, but I'm not really sure where our place in trying to help is. Like, I feel like a lot of the things that I could offer, I think, could be on like sport architecture, like from an intermediate level. What's the loading thresholds they can use? How many reps? What's safe? Like, this level of people usually and no one cares about it. And it's like, all right, well, a safety person would do this, or and elite athletes not going to really care about that, because they're
I care about that, but
a little bit, but like mostly you care if it's like, if there's 200 reps of a certain movement in a workout, or the sandbags are super crazy, like, you're wired to be like, I can figure this out. Like, that's what you are. So I don't think your normal, like, going in and creating intermediate masters threshold scaling, how many events you lay out in a week, it kind of does go against the ethos of the sport of being like this random thing. Because coaches are usually like planning an outcome. You're like doing all this training to plan to be prepared for this unknown thing. So I've always been like, what is my place in like providing any feedback here? Is it like influencing my own athletes to make them critically think so that they can go advocate for themselves? Or do I want to try to get into those rooms? And I'm just not really sure like where coaches fit in it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good question. I don't know if I even have the answer to that.
Yeah. That's why you're the PFA guy, not the PFCA.
Yeah,
Professional Fitness Coaches. I'm going to start your competitive organization.
There's something about PFA. It does roll off the tongue better with 2 Fs. I don't know.
PFFA?
Yeah, I think it does.
Yeah.
But there was no, I don't know.
Hold on, PFFAA or P? It would just get rid of one A.
Get rid of an A and replace it with an F. Okay. I think would roll off the tongue better, but.
All right. Whatever. You're bought in now.
We're in it now. I got my $10
now I'm
logo.
confused. What is it currently?
The Professional Fitness Athletes Association.
PFAA, not PFFA.
Okay, nice. Yeah. PF2A.
Yeah.
Yeah, hold on.
Do you need a little stretch?
Get in there. You have any more questions? Because I want to get to
I'm done. I was just looking at my list. That was all the stuff. I didn't get to finish the whole podcast, but I got enough out there.
Brent, I feel like earlier you had kind of gone through y'all's 3 pillars. This isn't my cool question, by the way. Yeah. But you had kind of gone through the foundation. I think you had 3 advocacy,
representation, career education and support services, and then earning opportunity and exposure.
Yeah. So, and I think we talked about the first one.
I didn't really get into the last one. So the first one, advocacy and representation, which is, right now what that looks like is, safety, and then really just influencing best practices. And we're doing that actively through movement standard, collaboration, Second one, career education support services. We've got the financial performance mindset, an alternative to health insurance, hopefully some more travel insurance stuff in there. And then third one, earning exposure. So more earning opportunities primarily through athlete exposure. That's not really a priority right now. In the future, that's what a lot of athlete associations work on, like the NFL Players Association. Their commercial division is trying to get millions of dollars for those athletes, and that usually looks like group licensing.
It's like basically if a shirt or a jersey is sold, some percentage then gets allocated back to the athletes or something along those lines.
And so group licensing is, and this is to make sure that we don't, tread on like what individual athletes are doing with their sponsorships and what their managers are working on. But there are opportunities for athletes to make money that are only really going to be available when all the athletes are together on that. Yeah. So that's, trading cards, video games.
Holy shit.
Jerseys.
A CrossFit video game?
CrossFit video game would probably be terrible.
Yo, one of my favorite video games of all time was a track and field game on normal Nintendo. And you would have to hold over the A-B button when they were going to do their long jump and then press them both at the same time when they jumped. And it was actually
I feel like if they made it kind of like that or like Mario Party where it's just not
simple
super intricate, it's just
yeah, your fatigue levels rising.
But yeah, so you think about something like that, only when you have, all the characters to select from that are popular. That's
Colton Mertens on the cover.
And it's the same with, jerseys. It's like, athletes will have, obviously that becomes more challenging in a sport like golf, tennis, and CrossFit because athletes are going out there with their own, kit, right? It's not like a team sport. But with playing cards is maybe the best example, right? Where if you have just a singular playing card, and WOD Zombie's done this, but again, if you had all of the athletes, especially with like a Topps or something like that, with a really well-respected playing card, then there's the playing card industry is insane.
I want that.
Dollars.
Yeah. Hold on.
Could you imagine ripping a pack and be like, oh shit, I got
Travis Mayer.
I got the Rich
holographic. Yeah.
The one of one 4-time in a row.
Yeah.
Gold.
So and that's not a, we want to also just, promote any athlete-led, athlete-centric media, which is just sort of like a general ethos of media should be focused around the athlete, which we kind of all know already. But that's not we have a lot of other things.
And you're talking about for the sports side, obviously.
As opposed to?
I think some people will hear that media should be focused around the athlete and then relate that back to affiliates.
Oh, yeah. Affiliates. Sorry. Yeah. No, when we're talking about the sport, when you look at sports and sports media, typically the sports properties that do the best are the ones that really dive into, personality-led storytelling around athletes, ups and downs in their season and competition. And so the more we can right now, that's really just us saying that's good. There's not a tangible plan around that because there's these other things that, I think can add the most value and, the resources we have.
I just had this, I said I had no more questions, but now I had this thought. I understand why you were super fired up about this when you were an athlete, because I feel like you were actively at the mercy of a lot of the dysfunctions that you were trying to solve. You're retired now, not really retired, but why are you so passionate about it now? Or what keeps you motivated? Because this is a lot of work.
It is a lot of work.
And I remember when we were going through this, I was so frustrated that I'm how many of the athletes are showing up to these meetings? Who's signing? And you're doing a lot behind the scenes. I don't think you get a lot of credit for just literally how much time has been put into it.
I'm just not going to give up. That's just all it is. I'm just not going to give up. That's all it really
hard working.
Yeah, it's hard hearing that.
Sorry, dude. I didn't think I'd make you emotional with that statement.
I don't know. I just don't like quitting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'll thank you. I'll thank you on behalf of the athletes.
Yeah, no, I think I kind of... yeah, shit. Hold on.
Damn, dude.
Way to go, Max.
Yeah, sorry. Oh, shit.
Why'd you do that?
I'm the worst interviewer ever.
No, it's good.
Had to have one more question.
I'm like, this podcast is almost over.
Take me to lunch, please.
Oh, jeez. No, I just, I don't know, man. It's like anything. I just got to the point at the end of last year too, where I realized I cared more about this than I did about competing.
Yeah.
And I'm just sick of it. I just don't, I want the next generation to have it better than me, right? And I don't think we're on a trajectory where that's going to happen right now.
Yeah.
If things are, I mean, it still could happen without me. Like if I just piss off, and then it will. It's like, great. But I think I'm just uniquely positioned, and I have a level of experience, and even with, you know, the cachet I have as an athlete, I'm like, I think I can do it. And I'm worried that if I don't do it, it might not happen.
Yeah.
And especially with an athlete association, like I do a lot of reading about former athlete associations. It's super interesting. The more I read about it, the more I'm like, that's what I want to do. Like that's like, that like speaks to me so much, right?
Yeah.
If I read a book about other stuff, it doesn't speak to me. It speaks to me more than being an athlete ever did.
Yeah.
Right. Like reading biographies of athletes, Denver, I was like, oh, that's cool. But then I read this stuff about an athlete association. I go, oh my gosh, this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
And when reading about it, you realize like they're almost always successful if they just keep trying.
Yeah.
Because it's this like, it's this thing in nature. It's unbalanced.
Yeah.
Without it.
Yeah.
And
yeah, the balance of power is really kind of skewed really heavily against athletes in this current space.
Yeah.
Like they don't really, and a lot of times people talk about them in that way. They're like, oh, well, Brent's out. New person's going to come in. Like it sounds disposable, but it's not really.
You know, but then you think about, and that's true, right? All athletes are disposable, right? And someone else will fill their shoes. And it's like, that's true. And you know what? I said that had a conversation with someone from the NFL Players Association, and he smiled. He's like, yeah, I've heard that before. He's like, yeah, like, welcome. He's like, yeah, we hear that all the time.
Yeah.
But then you think about, oh, like, you know, is Tom Brady really that disposable? And you look at
Michael Jordan just got brought back into the NBA announcing circle.
Oh man, that's gonna be cool.
Yeah.
But apparently the reason he did it is he's tired of the old heads crapping on the new generation, and he's gonna come in there and tell everyone that the product's way better than it's ever been.
Are you kidding me? I would have sworn that this dude's going to be the first person to talk shit.
Yeah, in my day.
No, he's not an in my day guy. I think he's like,
I'm going to hold him to it.
No, man, he's an owner. I feel like there's too much at stake for him. Like,
but it's just it's a genuine. It's a genuine belief of, like, in the same way. I mean, you know, within 1 year or 2 years, I know I'm going to see stuff on the floor and be like, I could not have done that.
Speaking of that, 165 cows on the Echo bike in 5 minutes. Can you do that, or could you ever do that?
No, I don't think so,
dude. That I've heard some of the cyclical metrics from the Brute Boys, and I was like, wow, this is evolving.
But yeah, I just think, and so with athlete associations, like it does work typically if someone keeps pushing for it. But also if there's situations where it hasn't, and then it takes like decades for someone to try again. Because if this fails, athlete associations don't work here.
That's what people said about grid, like WFP. They were like, oh, this is like a grid.
Yeah,
you know, like you have.
So you have to overcome that, like, you know, a negative
market
inertia.
skepticism.
And yeah, I mean, you know, the PFAA, like I've made mistakes, right? Like it hasn't been perfect. I think in hindsight we could have done a better job communicating, and that's why I'm here, right? Is to just to keep hammering this message and be more out in the forefront. Even while I was competing, you know, the ability for us to consistently communicate around what we were doing and even the conversations we were having with CrossFit, it doesn't pay to like drag that stuff up. Like, oh, we tried to ask for this and gave this very tangible solution about appeals. I'm sure you remember that.
Oh, I remember.
You know, and then, you know, time and time again, we weren't able to get like these actionable changes that were really low drag that would have been win-wins. And so we could have done that to like, whatever, but it doesn't. It's done now. It's done. Yeah. But yeah, I think I don't know. It's fun too. Yeah. Like it's a challenge. It's very challenging. I'm learning a lot, and like it's a good excuse to like see a bunch of people I want to spend more time with. Cause you know, when you're at events, like you don't get a lot of actual conversations, especially at like the games or semis. It's so like this pressure cooker, and you're holding your energy so you don't have those conversations. Yeah. And like even when I was at World Fitness Project watching, I just talked for 14 hours straight, 3 days in a row. It was great.
I need more of this.
Yeah, it was fun, even though I am an introvert. And so I don't know. Yeah, it's just
it's just a calling.
Just a calling. It just feels that way, and I don't want to quit on it. I mean, you know, I did CrossFit for 10 years. I played volleyball for 10, so I'll probably put in like 10 here.
Nice.
Well, you said that you know, even if you weren't doing it, you'd hope it'd still get done somehow. And I'd like to think that if you didn't ever start when did you start all this, by the way?
It was 2020, summer of 2020.
2020. I'd like to think that if you never got this ball rolling, that, or said another way, I think even if it ended today and nothing else ever happened, I think you did get a ball rolling, and that maybe it won't, couldn't get to where it should be if you're there. I still think, the ball's rolling a little bit, as if you had never shown up. I feel like we're looking at two different spots.
Yeah, and I would say 100%. And I think the way the demands went out and the way the market reacted to it, I know it was kind of like inflammatory and it kind of seemed like it wasn't a super good thing, but I think something like that needed to happen. Like it was almost like there needed to be some sort of a really strong market force to create like pressure for people to make a decision. Like this is not okay, so we're going to do something type stuff. Yeah. So I would say for sure there's definitely been a lot of progress.
Yeah, we haven't really spoken about the PFA's response. How long is this podcast? We can still do it. We could just quickly.
No, I'd actually rather ask you something else.
Okay. Yeah. I mean,
did you talk about it on Mayhem?
Yeah, we did.
Go. Everyone go to Mayhem. You're already subscribed. Just go watch that.
Yeah, you probably already watched
podcast, it. We got into it, and I'd be saying the same things here about our response to the 2024.
Yeah, we'll plug their podcast, which you probably already watched anyway. You can watch it there.
They do a great job. Go head over to Mayhem. All right. Can I ask my cool question now?
Yes. We've been waiting, Chris.
Okay. So. I have the
I gotta go.
So I have the worst memory probably of anyone you've ever met. But if I remember correctly, there it was, the final day of the games, and I was filming, doing media, and I put my camera down. We didn't have anybody still competing, and so I was like, I'm just gonna go watch as a fan. And I went and I sat next to Amanda Hari, and just to cheer you on because you were in contention to win the CrossFit Games.
Yep.
And, I just wanted to ask you about that. Like, what did that feel like? How did that play out? Like, where was your head at? How was it?
Yeah, I don't think much about the 2024 games. Honestly, it's just hard thinking about it. It was not a fun weekend. Dealing with, and there were a lot of things that we didn't know about that weekend that then we learned about after, which would have made it even harder and more frustrating. But at the time I just made a commitment to, I was like, I'm going to see this through, right? I'm going to finish this competition, hopefully in a way that could honor Lazar. And I felt like I knew him pretty well. And I felt like if something had happened to me, I would want him to keep competing. And I think he would have wanted to compete. It was, his career, it was his life. And so I felt like, I was going to continue to compete. And so, we did our best throughout that weekend, my coach and I, just to get through it and just to compete hard. And so, leading up to that workout, I was nervous. It was weird because I was trying to implement, leading up to it, some tactics that I could do to bring myself into a mental state that I felt was most conducive to competing that I've used before. At the same time, it was hard. It was just hard to do that emotionally because of, Lazar having drowned just like 2 or 3 days prior. So it was just like, it's a weird mental space, but we had a good strategy. I think I had on my forearm, I had a specific split times in the first part of that workout that I wanted to hit in a specific time because we felt like I needed to finish about 10th place in the first piece and then just go on feel after that with a rough strategy and finish about 10th in both. And we felt like if I finished about 10th place in both pieces that I would had a good shot of winning and staying in first. And I think the time was exactly the time that I got within a second.
The one that you had written on your arm?
Yeah. So
so you just had like maybe too conservative of a target, or
no? It was perfect because we finished 11th, and then I just blew up in the second one because I was tired.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So that's all it really was. Yeah. No. So it was. I think it was 2:43.
Well, so after that first one, you're sitting good, plans going well. Are you in your head at all even thinking like, holy crap, I'm about to win the games, or not even like that?
Just execution. Because I mean, I've been like maybe not in that situation.
I mean, you've been chasing that for forever. Was it weird to be like, I'm in this scenario here and finally it's at my doorstep and it's in a weird circumstance?
I don't know. I guess I've never really hyped up the games to be anything that different. I know Pat and I have talked about this privately. Like it is, it is the oldest competition. It's the most prestigious competition. It's the longest running competition. At the end of the day, it's a competition.
Yeah.
Right. And I've I've been just as nervous going into the final in Dubai 2019, and that turned out really well. It was actually a back-to-back workout, and I think I had a lead in that one as well, and I held the lead and I won. And I was like nervous going into it, and then like once it started, I was just like in the zone, did my thing, executed my strategy like perfectly. Actually, probably a little worse. You know, and I've been in the zone, and I've been in that points battle in Dubai again 2022 and lost it on the last lunge, which was funny, but it was like just happened. Like my shoulder just like clonk, just gave out. And then, so it's, I don't know, like I've been in a lot of those, like, oh, you're in the points race for first or third. A lot of times it's either for first or for third for me. And some of those times I've risen to the occasion. Other times I've fallen short. And there's a few of those. Like I think the 2020, let me get the year right. Was it 2024 we did the Echo Bike Total Bar?
2024?
That was 20. What was the finale of 2024 semis?
Dude,
I'm usually really good at this. Anyway, there was a semifinal where Pat and I, that was 2023. Semifinal 2023 final workout was like a sprint of Echo Bike, Total Bar, sandbag carry. And that was one where I let my nerves kind of get to me, and I went a little past my strategy, and I messed up my technique on the toes to bar, and that caused me to blow up. And Pat beat me, and I'm like, Brent, you actually like kicked that into the stands like a field goal. You just like kicked it to the left. Punted it. Like that was a genuine, you choked. But so again, at the games, I guess. Hold on.
But in that moment at semis, all you're going to do is still qualify for the thing you've done 100 times.
Yeah, but I really wanted to win.
I know, I get that, and I appreciate that.
I hate losing to Pat.
No, I get that, and I appreciate that. But the net goal or the net result is that you still end up qualifying for a thing you've done a bunch. Whereas this is like,
so that's your interpretation of the situation, which is different to how I view the sport.
I gotcha.
Yeah. Which I guess, and again, I think that's from some people watching it. You know, and again, I remember someone messaging me who I played volleyball with after my first time I failed going to the CrossFit Games, which was 2014 regionals. I failed this last overhead squat like 4 times. And if I just made one of those, I would have been a
remember
CrossFit
that
Games
video.
athlete. Yeah. And he's like, oh man, like, did you just like see the games on the finish line and you just like crumbled? No, like I'm like, well, you played volleyball. Like, have you missed a final serve? He's like, yeah. I'm like, what happened? He's like, I just like missed it. Yeah, like, were you nervous? He's like, well, yeah, a little bit, but yeah, like we played together, dude. This is the same.
Same concept.
It's kind of the same. At least that's for me. And maybe people will say, oh, Brent, you're just projecting. You crumbled under the pressure, and maybe I did.
And was it the same after the event was over? Or is it just kind of like, oh, I just missed it? Or was it like, dang, I could have almost been champ?
So again, 2024, first thruster workout, like, I don't know, went well. Like the thruster pull up is, 2 minutes 43. Finish line. I'm like, Kate, like trying to calm my breathing down, doing these specific, like, breathing. I forget what it was now. I think it was like deep breath in, fast breath out or something like that. Went back, coach like put some ice water on my back, and he's like, you got this. Like you can, like just be calm, break up the thrusters like this, break up the bar muscle ups like this, just like we talked about. Like you got this, like stay steady. And I was like, yeah, like I got this. I'm tired, but I feel good. And then the whole second part was good. It was like mentally, I was like in it in the way that I'm always in it. I think it was like I was listening to my body, but like holding to my strategy, and guys were like getting past me, especially in that second set of bar muscle ups. But I was like, okay, that one was hard. Okay. Quick twos. And then as soon as I finished my last bar muscle up, I like got right to the bar. I'm like, Brent, you got to go. Like you're losing time here. You got to pick that thing up and trust you can do. Cause someone in the back's like, oh, those last thrusters are easy.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, sweet. Grab those.
That's the worst thing to hear ever. I feel like.
Yeah. And so then, and those were really, really not easy for me, but I like pushed and I finished, and I was in like tremendous amount of pain. Like I was the whole, like my like hands were like seizing up. And I remember BK coming over like, oh man, you went there. I'm like, yeah. Like I went there. And then at the time I'm thinking, I'm like, I don't really know what happened. I know I did well got what I wanted on the first one. Like, I don't think that second one went great, but like maybe. And then, they announced like, and third place, Brent. And I think I went, oh shit. Like, well, not like, gosh, better than fourth. Yeah. And then I was disappointed, but it was kind of like, it's like, I know in that one, there's nothing differently I could have done. Like if I'd went slower in the first one, that second one would have been like a little faster.
Yeah.
And maybe that second one, I could have started breaking up my bar muscle ups a little sooner, but then we're talking like saving like maybe 8 seconds, 10. Like you're not saving. I haven't done the math on how much faster I would have needed to go, but it probably would have been like 45 seconds quicker.
I have coached.
That's my recollection of it. I don't think anyone's ever asked. So.
I've coached Noah, Travis, Annika at the game, or Annika now at the games, and just like thinking about those three personalities, you're so level-headed. I feel like their emotional selves in those moments is like just way different. Like just hearing you talk about that, like, oh, the games moment being in the final contention is like, it's kind of just sounds like it's just a workout to you. Like, I know it's not, because I know you did all the preparation.
I was more nervous before that than, like, I've been that nervous. But it was hard. It was harder dealing with the nerves just because of Lazar's death. And it was like, it was hard to like get myself into a, but like once it started, it was the same. Yeah. And I think part of that too is like, there's this gradual escalation over the past 20 years of my life where I took on more and more responsibility. Like I remember like swimming when I was 16, I'm like, or 17, I'm like, this is the only opportunity you will ever have to break this record that you've been training for 3 years. And I did it. Yeah. And I was like really nervous. And in volleyball, it's like I was, we'd be in gold medal provincial finals for my team. And it was like, we're 58-0 and we need to win this game to go an undefeated 59-0 season. And if we don't, that's not going to be very fun to lose the last game of the season.
58-1.
58-1 does not sound great. Yeah. And so, I've like, and the maybe 300 fans there. And then it's like, oh, I played college and you'd get subbed in. I didn't get a lot of starting time, but I would get subbed in to serve. And it's like a tight game. Yeah. So you're like kind of cold. You go up, you dribble.
Put this in,
like that was my role. And so then CrossFit's just gradually from regionals to 9 CrossFit games. It's like, that's like kind of been my job. And so dealing with those, like I've been in those, like, oh, you're almost third, or you have to hold on to first or fight off to hold on to second. Like I've done that a lot. Yeah. And so I don't know, it didn't. Yeah.
The moment didn't overwhelm.
I don't think so. Like I guess it's easy
built up to it.
Yeah. And it's just, what's funny is afterwards, me and my coach and I were talking. He said, I did my best to, didn't use the word Fran when it was announced. He's like, I didn't want you thinking about that. We just kept saying, and I was like, yeah, that's a good point. Cause that's not a great workout for me. Right.
And back to back, same movement.
Points. Yeah. I think it should have been 300 points where you finish that, you do it again with even heavier thrusters and pullovers. So, but yeah, no, I don't know. That's like my recollection of it, which is honest. Yeah. But yeah, I think it's just different than, I'm not going to say I wasn't nervous.
Let me get a new battery real quick. Keep talking though.
He wanted the, controversial clickbaity response. I was heartbroken and cried for 8 years. And
we were upset.
I didn't want that. Yeah. No. I just wanted I've never heard anyone ask him this.
I've actually never heard you talk about this at all. You haven't at all.
Have. No. And honestly, and part of it too was, the games, it was not.
Yeah. The competitive focus wasn't the same anyways.
Yeah. And my coach and I, we just made a commitment that we were going to see it through. But it was it was really hard. You're crying between every workout. I know. Right? Like it wasn't fun back there. It was like being in a freaking tomb for 3 days. So that wasn't very enjoyable. And then, also the whole thing just kind of felt like dirty at the same time. Yeah. Like it wasn't enjoyable. It didn't feel like a ton of pride throughout the weekend. Like it just kind of felt wrong. But at the same time, I just decided and made the commitment that I was just going to see it through. And part of that's because it's my job. And it's like if someone passed away that I loved, I'd probably work out. And I said this to some of the athletes. I'm like, if someone passed away that I loved, I'd probably do a workout and I'd probably go to work. Like that's the kind of person I am, to just continue with routine. And that would help me just get through it. Not that I wouldn't, mourn, and so I'm like, this is both working out and my job. Yeah. So I'm going to see it through. I'm going to do my job and, finish it out. But yeah. And so that last workout, it was pretty I was nervous for sure in the corrals and stuff, but but once you hit the floor and it was, 30 seconds, it was pretty
kind of standard.
Pretty standard. Yeah. And on the floor, doing the thing, I wasn't it was funny afterwards. Maybe 2 days later, I was talking to my coach And he said, yeah, he's like, when I had my shoulder, rubbing your shoulders, ice, he's like, oh, Brent's toast.
He knew?
He knew.
Oh.
Yeah, he's like, his breathing and his heart rate, he can just tell
I could tell that when I watched you row yesterday with Travis in the throwdown.
Yeah,
I looked over at the 8-minute mark and I was like, they're hurting.
Yeah. And so it was, but it was interesting. It was the same on the track and field event. I'd worked so much on my, my running and my shuttle runs, like sprints and stuff. And so I was really excited for that second part. And the mile went really well. I think I finished third.
What'd you run?
5:05, 5:04 or something. I was third. I think Roman and Jeff were the only ones that beat me. And so I was really happy. Ricky. Roman and Ricky. Jeff pulled out.
Yeah.
So,
God, they need to start a podcast. What a great morning show that would be. Roman and Ricky in the mornings.
yeah, that's a good, those are like unique names too, right? So we ran, I was really, really happy with that, with the outcome that I put forward there because we'd been working on running. We had a long break. We had like at least 5 to 7 minutes before we did the shuttle runs. And in that, it was shuttle run, sandbag, carry. So it was, whatever, basically a 400-meter dash type thing. And as I was like, I put a little bit of ice on me. I drank some cold water, drank some carbs, changed my shoes, whatever. And, like 2 minutes left, 1 minute left. And I'm like there, I'm thinking, you are not recovered. Like you are, your legs are rock hard. Your heart rate still feels like it's at like 140 or 50. Should be at 105 here. And so part of that would have been the stress from the weekend, but also I think the training I did leading up to that, I did quite a bit of heat training to prepare for the heat because we didn't know really how much we were going to be outside. And I think that it worked and it allowed me to be really fit and have like higher blood volume, but I should have done some more training in air conditioning.
So you could push the thresholds up, like the
speeds?
speeds?
And also I don't think we did some intentional, like really high intensity interval training with long breaks earlier in the year that worked well. And I think the last few years, as I've gotten stronger, more powerful, and probably just older, I haven't been recovering as well in that, like if I do something like a really intense CrossFit piece for anywhere from 3 to 10 minutes and then when I'm doing that in training, I'm like, oh, I'm taking a 40-minute break before my next piece. Like I'll go inside and eat whatever. Yeah. Not that like, crack the knuckles, do the next whatever intervals, do the next whatever weightlifting session. I take these longer and longer breaks. And so because I'm able to express more fitness and power in the actual traditional CrossFit workout, I'm getting really good times, better than I've ever gotten, but it's like costing me more and then my recovery isn't as good. So maybe that's a lower aerobic base. Maybe that's more power. Maybe that's just not training that recovery in the actual sessions. Some of that would have been the heat prep and then just the lack of those intervals. So I think that shuttle run, I got a pretty low score on that relative to what I think my actual ability and potential is in that. It wasn't displayed because of my lack of recovery. Yeah. And that same thing in that thruster workout, during the moment, I finished that first workout. I'm like, you're good. You got this. And now looking back, you go like, yeah, it was the same thing, that 4-minute break after the first workout.
Just not recovered enough.
Not recovered at all. Yeah, legs, grip, everything was just like totally still. Fire was completely still like fully alight, not just
didn't dim
at all. And then part of that is because I'm just not great at thrusters and pull-ups. For me to get in a competitive time like that, I have to go really intentionally move with a lot of speed. But I mean, I'm really good at running, and I did not recover from that either. So I think it was more.
Is 5:05 a PR for you, mile?
Yeah. It was a PR. Yeah. So that's the one thing I got to do next summer is I got to train. I want to break 5 minutes. I had that written on like a goal board when I was 21 in my first CrossFit gym, and I've got all the other goals.
I feel like if you are not full-time CrossFitting, it should be not easy to attain because I don't think that's ever easy to attain, but you could lose like 5 or 10 pounds of muscle.
I just lose 10 pounds, I think if I just lose 10 pounds and run 3 times a week for like a couple months.
Yeah, I think you'd be able to do it.
I'll be able to do it.
Check your final box.
I know. I do need to do that.
Conclusion.
Yeah. There's that and a 315 snatch, which I don't know if I'll ever bother doing.
Ooh, what's your best ever, 300?
I've done 305 twice. And I've done 300 and 305 like pretty easily a few times and in like fatigue kind of hard scenarios. So I know it's like if it was
you need the right day.
I know, yeah. And like
right
even at the 2023 semis, I hit 300 after the 800-meter treadmill run, and it was like easy. And I was like, oh man, if that was just, hey, establish a 1 rep, you have like 5 attempts.
That was the day.
I could have gotten it that day, and I could have done it again last year. We just didn't snatch at any events.
Yeah.
It was like it's in the tank there. I mean, you know what that's like. You have you can't just test all those things in training, or else you're not training. So.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, I'm about to run out of battery.
Yeah, let's get this. Holy, this was long.
I'm hungry too.
Is the movementstandards.com up?
Yeah, it's up. There's a sample there, and then the AFJ and us will continue.
Where do you want to send people? Or is anything
the
ready?
PFAA.org and the movementstandards.com, and I guess just follow me on Instagram if you want, but
They probably already do.
maybe all 300 of you.
Ish.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
Appreciate you, Brent.
Thank you, Max.